advance in this area. We can't say, of course, because of operational security, exactly where we are on the border. I understand we have some videotape of the attack that we shot here from our position just a few minutes ago. We saw a number of Hellfire missiles launched from the helicopters. Obviously, it's nighttime, so we did not see the helicopters themselves, but we could hear them, and we could see the engines of the Hellfire missiles propelling them down to the Iraqi positions, and then each time there would be a loud explosion. We have had quite a bit of skirmishing along the border today, Dan. U.S. and British forces are essentially in front of me. The Iraqi border is immediately behind me. All during the day, we've heard coalition artillery and tanks sending rounds downrange into Iraqi positions, but it wasn't a serious organized attack. It seemed really all day to be harassing fire. But tonight, as soon as the sun went down, it got fully dark. We started to hear the helicopters coming, and this is a much more organized offensive across the border inside Iraq. Coalition helicopters firing a number of missiles, presumably on Iraqi positions. Dan?
Scott, let's take this from the top. Insofar as you could determine what touched off this battle, was it Iraqi artillery? Was it the firing? We know at least one Scud was fired. At least, let me say, we have reason to believe that at least one Scud has been fired. But what touched off this particular battle? And for those of you who maybe join us in progress, Scott, excuse me, let me point out that we're on the air now because Scott Pelley is right along the Kuwait-Iraqi border. There has been some exchange of fire there. But Scott, what touched it off, do you know?
Dan, it does not seem to be any response to anything that the Iraqis did. It has been very quiet here for the last hour or so. As you mentioned, the Iraqis launched at least 3 missiles into Kuwait earlier today. That was several hours ago. But apparently these forces had been waiting for nightfall because as soon as it got completely dark here, we could hear the helicopters coming. They went right over the border. There is a mountain behind us which you can't see in the darkness, but on that mountain there are a number of communications towers which we always expected to be among the first targets hit. And we've known all day long that there were Iraqi forces not far over the border, perhaps Iraqi armor. As you know, Dan, these attack helicopters are used principally for attacking armor on the ground, armored personnel carriers, artillery tubes, and main battle tanks. And that may be what we're seeing tonight. Presumably, the pilots will be using their night vision equipment and their Apache target acquisition equipment, which can see in total darkness and illuminate the enemy. And these Hellfire missiles are, of course, very precise guided missiles. We've heard about 9 of them fired so far. The helicopters are still there. I can hear them, but we haven't had any missile launches in the last minute or so.
Scott, do you know whether the helicopters involved are the so-called Super Cobra, which is an attack and recon helicopter, the standard Apaches, or the new and greatly improved with longer range and a lot of more sophisticated equipment Apache longbows? Do you know what kind of helicopters, and perhaps more than one kind, has been involved?
Well, that's right, Dan. It may be more than one kind, and we don't know precisely which one. As you know, the Army flies the Apache, the Marine Corps flies the Cobra, and we also have a large number of British forces at this position mixed in with American forces. It's not inconceivable that this could be a British attack or a combined Allied attack. It's unclear which helicopters are being used, but clearly they are attack helicopters firing a missile very much like the Hellfire, if not the Hellfire itself.
Scott Pelley reporting live from along the Kuwait-Iraqi border where there is combat. This raises the possibility that there's going to be a sort of reverse order to what was the expected attack. Last night's firing in Baghdad was at a specific target. It was expected that what would follow in a few hours, if not days, would be a massive U.S. air campaign followed by a ground attack. Now, hearing and seeing what Scott Pelley reported, this raises the possibility that the ground attack is actually going to be launched before or maybe simultaneously with the massive air attack. We just don't know, but you should be open to the possibility that the ground attack has already begun, given what Scott Pelley is reporting there. Now, there's a new word of a possible, and I underscore the word possible, gas alert in Kuwait City. We go live to CBS News correspondent Mark Phillips. Mark, what are the facts insofar as we know them?
The facts are that we just had an alert here. It's the fourth one that we've had today, and the all clear has now blown, a long, steady siren following the intermittent wailing sound that's been a feature of life here over the past 12 or 18 hours or so. This may not be war yet, but it's sure beginning to feel like it around here. It's been a day of high anxiety and no small amount of confusion either. There have been four, as I say, separate alerts here, people scurrying through the streets, people going into shelters, those who have them putting on gas masks and chemical suits, anti-chemical weapon suits. A large number of the population, in fact the majority of course, don't have that kind of equipment. But there have been several instances here over the course of the day of reports coming in from the field as well of there having been Iraqi missile strikes around and about the various military positions, American and British, in the Kuwaiti desert, and reports as well of at least one of those missiles having been shot down by an American Patriot anti-missile missile. So even in the prelude to the launch of the main attack here, it certainly feels like war is already underway. Dan?
Oh, there's no doubt about that. The nation is at war. No one should be mistaken about that. Now, we want to talk about the reports that at least 3 missiles were fired from Iraq into Kuwait today in retaliation for the United States raid on Baghdad last night. All are said to have been intercepted or thudded harmlessly into the sand. This is according to U.S. officials. Now, we do not know what kind of missiles these were. They may have been Scud missiles, the so-called new and improved Scud missiles, the Al-Samud missiles. We simply don't know what kind of missiles they were. But at least one of them is said to have been knocked down by U.S. Patriot anti-missile defense systems. Now, in the early going, the best we can do is pass along the most reliable information we know, but I remind you again, frequently in these situations, the first things you hear are not correct, or at least not altogether correct. Now, Dateline Ankara, Turkey, Turkey's parliament now has voted to allow U.S. military to use Turkish airspace for the Iraq war. More about that later, but let's go to the Pentagon and David Martin. David, what about the possibility that the ground war has already started, if you will, minus the massive opening air campaign that we expected?
I think what we're seeing right now, what Scott Pelley was reporting, are the opening probes in the ground invasion, and that within a matter of hours we are going to see the lead elements anyway of the ground force push off and start moving toward Baghdad. And I think the reason the schedule for the ground invasion is being advanced is one, because of all those reports that entire divisions of regular Army Iraqi troops are ready to surrender. So now I think we're going to have a briefing from the Secretary of Defense. And
right, before we do that, there's more gunfire where Scott Pelley is along the Kuwait-Iraq border, so we go back live now, if we can do it. Remember, this is live television, and we don't have all the facilities we normally do. Scott Pelley, are you there? And what's happening now?
Dan, I am. We hear the attack helicopters still patrolling up and down the border immediately behind us. It sounds for all the world that he's looking for targets of opportunity over there. He came over the border just as soon as it got dark here in Iraq and began firing what looked like Hellfire missiles. We counted 9 of those missiles. They're typically used against armor. Clearly the helicopter is shooting on Iraqi positions over in Iraq. There's also a major communications center on a mountain just over my right shoulder, and we saw a couple of rounds hit in that area as well. We've known for some time that would be a major target for U.S. helicopters. It's very much the kind of attack, Dan, that would precede an armored advance, although I will tell you at this moment, we don't see any of the armor moving or hear any of the armor moving, but the attack helicopter or helicopters are patrolling up and down the border looking for targets as we speak.
They come to you right now.
Scott, how far away are the major explosions that we hear and see on that videotape? At approximately what distance?
Dan, I would say approximately a mile. We are essentially standing right on top of the Iraqi border where we are here. U.S. forces are arrayed in front of me to the right. British forces are arrayed in front of me to the left. And right behind me, those lights you see right behind me, are in Iraq. The helicopter is very nearby. It's firing its missiles further north, and I would say about a mile away, but that's a pretty rough guess.
Scott, hang with us here while we, for those of you who may have just joined us, or for others who may be somewhat confused by the rapid developments, some missiles have been fired in the direction of Kuwait. At least 3 are reported. What kind of missiles, we don't know. One of them is reported, at least one of them is reported to have been knocked out of the sky by U.S. Patriot ground to air anti-missile defenses. Another one may have thudded to the ground. What you have here is very obviously the beginning of the ground war. It's not beginning when everybody thought it would. It's not beginning in the way everybody thought it would. Not everybody thought it would be preceded by a tremendous air attack. The ground war is underway, as you've seen and heard from Scott Pelley. Now at the Defense Department, here's the Secretary of Defense, Donald Rumsfeld.
Good morning. The United States and the international community have made every effort to avoid war. Diplomacy and sanctions over more than a decade have not worked. And now, by rejecting President Bush's ultimatum, the Iraqi regime has chosen military conflict over peaceful disarmament. Coalition forces hit a senior Iraqi leadership compound last evening. The damage assessment on the compound is pending. That was the first. It will likely not be the last. The days of the Saddam Hussein regime are numbered. We continue to feel that there's no need for a broader conflict if the Iraqi leaders act to save themselves and to prevent such further conflict. What will follow will not be a repeat of any other conflict. It will be of a force and scope and scale that has been beyond what has been seen before. The Iraqi soldiers and officers must ask themselves whether they want to die fighting for a doomed regime, or do they want to survive, help the Iraqi people in the liberation of their country, and play a role in a new, free Iraq. If Saddam Hussein or his generals issue orders to use weapons of mass destruction, whether on coalition forces, free Iraqi forces, neighboring countries, or innocent Iraqi civilians, as they have done before, those orders should not be followed. Do not follow orders to destroy dams or flood villages. Do not follow orders to destroy your country's oil, which is the Iraqi people, and they will need it to rebuild their country when that regime is gone. Following such orders would be to commit crimes against the Iraqi people. See those orders for what they are, the last desperate gasp of a dying regime. Those who follow orders to commit such crimes will be found and they will be punished. War crimes will be prosecuted, and it will be no excuse to say, I was just following orders. Any official involved in such crimes will forfeit hope of amnesty or leniency with respect to past actions. Military units that want to live and act with honor should listen to coalition radio broadcasts to receive instructions as to how you may demonstrate that you do not intend to fight. You will have a place in a free Iraq if you do the right thing. But if you follow Saddam Hussein's orders, you will share his fate, and the choice is yours. To the Iraqi people, let me say that the day of your liberation will soon be at hand. Coalition forces will take every precaution to protect innocent civilians. Once hostilities begin, stay in your homes and listen to coalition radio stations for instructions on what to do to remain safe and out of the line of fire. Iraqi civilians do not go to work. Stay away from military targets. and any facilities where Saddam Hussein has moved military assets. Arrangements are being made to care for refugees and displaced persons inside of Iraq. There is no need for Iraqis to flee across their borders into neighboring countries. Listen for instructions on how to get food, water, and medical supplies. Iraq belongs to the Iraqi people. And once Saddam Hussein's regime is removed, we intend to see that functional and political authority is placed in the hands of Iraqis as quickly as is possible. Coalition forces will stay only as long as necessary to finish the job, and not a day longer. Let me say a word about our coalition. Already more than 35 nations have publicly associated themselves with the coalition effort in Iraq. And that does not include a large number of other countries that are helping in very important ways, but some of which prefer to do so privately at this time. As was the case in Afghanistan, our policy is to accept help from countries on a basis that is comfortable to them, and let them characterize how, in fact, they are helping the coalition. As the operation unfolds, the number of countries publicly associating themselves with the coalition is likely to grow, just as it has with Operation Enduring Freedom. The coalition in Iraq includes countries from every part of the world, including a large number of Muslim-majority countries. Some are supporting the effort publicly, others are doing so privately. This is not a war against a people. It is not a war against a country. It is most certainly not a war against a religion. It is a war against a regime. Many countries have committed combat and combat support forces to the effort in Iraq. Others are providing access, basing, overflight, refueling, force protection, and intelligence sharing. Still others have pledged to participate in stability operations and post-Saddam reconstruction efforts. When the situation on the ground permits, the humanitarian activities will go forward promptly. Each coalition member is playing a critical role in the liberation of a repressed people and the disarmament of a dangerous regime. Finally, to those in our government, let me say a word about security of operational details. It's essential that everyone with access to classified operational details exercise discipline. There is no excuse for anyone revealing sensitive information that will almost certainly put the lives of men and women in uniform at risk. At a time when coalition forces are poised for battle, any compromise of classified information that gives the enemy knowledge of the positions of our forces, or the plans, or the timing of future operations, can result in the death of coalition service men and women. Don't do it. Let me close by saying that war is the last choice, let there be no doubt. The American people can take comfort in knowing that their country has done everything humanly possible to avoid war and to secure Iraq's peaceful disarmament. We have the greatest fighting forces on the face of the earth. Our nation is blessed to have so many brave men and women who voluntarily risk their lives to protect our country. As they prepare for battle, the prayers of all Americans are with them and with their families. The coalition against Iraq, called Operation Iraq Freedom, is large and growing. This is not a unilateral action, as is being characterized in the media. Indeed, the coalition in this activity is larger than the coalition that existed during the Gulf War in 1991. And that coalition, those forces are ready.
As the briefing, the official briefing at the Defense Department by Secretary of Defense Rumsfeld goes on, we take you again live to the Kuwait-Iraq border, where CBS News has correspondent Scott Pelley. Pelley's been there for some time, reporting on what is clearly some attacks by U.S. helicopters on Iraqi positions. This would be, as Scott has pointed out, a standard order of battle to prepare the way for the major land force which is planned to invade Iraq in a matter of
Come to me if you want.
days, if not hours. Scott